27 white cat hairs stuck in the lining of a bloodstained jacket, hidden in a plastic bag in the woods. Those hairs put a man in prison for murder. Not his blood, not a witness, cat hair. And the DNA that convicted him wasn't human at all. It belonged to a cat named Snowball. Prince Edward Island, Canada. Red dirt roads, potato fields, and villages where everybody knows everybody's business. In October 1994, Shirley Duguay was 32 years old, and she was raising 5 children. She lived near Richmond, a community small enough that you could drive through it without noticing. On October 3rd, she left the kids with a sitter and went out for the evening. She never came home. And for the next 7 months, nobody could say what had happened to her. The first sign of trouble was her car, found abandoned down a dirt road not far away. Inside it, blood. Not a smear. Enough that the search stopped being a missing person case. Volunteers walked the fields. Divers went into the ponds. People searched the woods for weeks. Nothing. Suspicion settled fast on one man, her estranged common-law husband, Douglas Beamish. He was the father of some of her children, and the relationship hadn't ended quietly. But suspicion isn't evidence. No body, no weapon, and not one person who saw anything. Then a searcher in the woods found a plastic bag that had been left in the brush. Inside was a men's leather jacket. Brown, ordinary, the kind hanging in half the closets on the island. It was soaked in blood. And this is where the case cracks open, just barely. The lab matched that blood to Shirley Duguay. Her blood, on a jacket she would never have worn. So police had a garment that had been close enough to her to end up covered in it. Whoever wore it that night was almost certainly the person they'd been looking for all along. But a jacket with no name in, it's just a jacket. They needed to tie it to a person. Which is how Sergeant Roger Savoy of the RCMP ended up staring at the inside of a coat. Think about the lining of your own jacket for a second. You have never cleaned it, not once. You brush off the outside. Nobody in history has turned a sleeve inside out to wipe it down. And clinging to that lining were hairs. Short, fine, white, and very obviously not human. 27 of them. Cat hair. Which, in 1994, was worth almost exactly nothing. You could tell a courtroom it came from a cat. You couldn't tell them which cat. There were thousands of white cats within an hour's drive of where that bag was found. So Savoy logged it and kept working. Months later, he was at Beamish's parents' house. Beamish had been staying there. And walking the property, Savoy noticed something out in the yard. A white, long-haired cat. Fluffy enough that you'd stand up wearing half of it. Its name was Snowball. And Savoy had a thought that, in 1994, sounded genuinely absurd. If human DNA can identify a person, why can't cat DNA identify a cat? Nobody had ever tried it. Not in Canada, not in the United States, not in any criminal trial anywhere. Then, in May 1995, 7 months after she vanished, Shirley Duguay's body was found. She'd been buried in a shallow grave in the woods, not far from where that jacket turned up. She had been beaten to death. Her children had spent an entire winter not knowing. Now there was a body, a jacket, and a suspect. And nothing solid connecting all three. So Savoy did something no Canadian investigator had ever done. He collected a blood sample from a cat. A vet drew it from Snowball, an animal with no idea it had just become evidence in a homicide. That vial went to a laboratory in Maryland that had never touched a criminal case in its life. The Laboratory of Genomic Diversity, run out of America's National Cancer Institute. Its director was a geneticist named Stephen O'Brien, and his actual specialty was big cats. Cheetahs. Lions. The genetics of endangered species. Nothing in his career pointed toward a courtroom. But his team had built something nobody else had, genetic markers for ordinary domestic cats. Markers are short stretches of DNA that repeat, and the number of repeats varies between individuals. Count the repeats at 10 separate locations, and you get a string of numbers. A profile. It's the same principle as human DNA typing. The only thing that changes is the species. But there was a problem, and it's the part of this story most retellings skip right past. The DNA in a hair mostly sits in the root, the little bulb that was anchored under the skin. A shed hair with no root is close to useless. You need the follicle for a clean profile. Of those 27 hairs, enough still had roots attached to give the lab something to work with. They extracted the DNA, ran the 10 markers, and compared the result against Snowball's blood. It matched, every marker. Those hairs had come off that one specific cat. If that just shifted how you think about evidence, that's exactly what this channel is for. Stick around. Because the match was the easy part, convincing a judge to allow it was the real fight. And the defense had a genuinely good argument ready. Cats, they pointed out, aren't people. Humans have been breeding cats for generations. Pedigree breeds are, by definition, close relatives. If every white cat on the island shared roughly the same DNA, the match proved nothing at all. You wouldn't have matched those hairs to Snowball. You'd have matched them to every cat in the province. So O'Brien's team had to prove something nobody had ever needed to prove before. That cats, genetically, are individuals. And the way they proved it's the best part of this case. They asked the RCMP to go back to Prince Edward Island and collect blood from local cats. Not lab animals, not show cats, barn cats, house cats, the one asleep on somebody's porch step. Around 20 of them, pulled from the same small island community that Jacket had come from. If Snowball's profile was common, those island cats would keep coming back with the same numbers. They didn't. Every single cat came back different. Genetically, they were strangers to each other. And there's a reason for that which surprises people. Cats aren't domesticated the way dogs are. Dogs we shaped deliberately, breed by breed, over thousands of years, for work we wanted done. Cats mostly bred on their own terms, in barns and alleys, entirely outside anybody's plan. Which left them something purebred show cats have lost, a wide, messy, wildly varied gene pool. The cat asleep on a hay bale is a genetic stranger to the cat in the next barn over. With that island survey finished, the match could finally be turned into an actual number. The odds that some random cat, and not Snowball, produced that profile, came out near 1 in 45 million. There are nowhere close to 45 million cats on Prince Edward Island. There never have been. In 1996, the case went to trial, and the science went on trial right alongside it. The defense fought to keep it out, and they had precedent on their side. There wasn't any. Courts are cautious about new forensic methods, and they should be. Bad science has convicted innocent people before. But the Island Cat Survey answered the objection directly. The method had been tested against the real world. The judge allowed it. Animal DNA entered a criminal courtroom for the first time in history. And once it was in, the rest of the evidence finally had something solid to stand on. A jacket carrying the victim's blood. Hairs in its lining from a cat in the house he was living in. In July 1996, a jury convicted Douglas Beamish of second-degree murder in Shirley Duguay's death. He was sentenced to life in prison, with parole held off for well over a decade. The genetics were later written up in Nature, one of the biggest science journals on Earth. And that's when the idea spread. If a cat could do it, so could a dog. Since then, animal DNA has turned up in cases all across North America and Europe. Dog hair on a victim's clothes. Cat hair on a suspect's seat covers. It's ordinary work now. In one Arizona case, seed pods in a truck bed were matched to one specific tree at the scene. There are labs today that do nothing but non-human forensic DNA. All of it traces back here. Here's the part actually worth carrying out of this video, long after you've forgotten the names. He thought about the obvious things, the body, the weapon, the jacket, bagged and dumped in the woods. He never once thought about the cat that had been sleeping on him for weeks. Nobody would. You don't notice the hair on your own shoulder until a stranger points at it. That's the pattern in almost every case like this. The evidence isn't hidden, it's just beneath noticing. Everything you wear is quietly keeping a record of where you've been, and what you've been near. You can wash your hands. You can burn a weapon. You can't brush a lining you've never thought about. Shirley Duguay was 32, and 5 children spent a winter waiting for her to come home. 27 hairs and a cat named Snowball are the reason her case has an answer at all. If you want more cases broken by the one detail nobody thought to hide, subscribe. Next time, the seed pods in a truck bed that placed a killer under a single tree in the Arizona desert. Cases like this deserve to be remembered. Thank you for spending this time with her story.